Am I more likely to receive a grant if I partner with another organization on a project? Of course, I can't give you a one-word answer, but if I had to, the answer would be yes. Partnerships can make a big difference when it comes to securing grant funding, but it's not always a straightforward decision. It's very rarely a straightforward decision. So, we're going to break down a few key points here when deciding whether to partner with another organization on a grant application and give you a few more things to think about. There are several videos on this channel relating to partnerships. Some of the information is redundant, some of it is not. Okay, and some of the redundancies have to do with this being one of the most important topics in grant writing for community-based organizations in years. I'm Benjamin Dean from grantgetting.com. I hope you enjoy this video as well as others on the channel which are aimed at helping you get more grants. There is a link in the description. If you want to go deeper on this area, check it out. It's a free download. Okay. What are the advantages of partnering on a grant? Well, the hypothetical advantages of partnering on a grant would be that it allows your organization a greater chance of receiving funding from the funder, from a particular grant opportunity, we'll say. So, looking at that topic specifically, what is the amount of money I can expect to receive if I were to submit a grant individually or submit a grant jointly? I use what's called an expected value. It is a very simple calculation that I also use in much of my grant research as well, which says, here's how much, here's the whole logic. Here's the range of funding. Let's say the range of funding is between $50,000 and $75,000 for this particular grant. We know that they typically get 100 grant applications a year and they fund, let's say 10. So they fund 10%. Right? So that's sort of a baseline number. I know that if I am an average grant applicant, I have about a 10% chance. If I'm below average, it's less than 10%. If I'm above average, it's more than 10%, right? But there's sort of your baseline number to start. So if I apply for $50,000 and I'm an average applicant, I can expect to receive $5,000. Okay? Now, if I know that I can bring in a partner and I will be a well above average organization submitting a grant application. Maybe my chances double. Maybe I feel more comfortable asking for $75,000, right? And I think I've got probably a 20% chance. Okay. So let's say, and we're going to split the dollars 50-50. So if I'm applying now for $75,000, I think I've got a 20% chance of getting that, which is $15,000 is my expected value. But I need to split that 50-50. 7,500 for my organization, 7,500 for my partner organization. My expected value is $7,500. That is $2,500 higher than the $5,000 I expected if I were to do it individually, right? That's a very crude example, but it gives you something to look at that is a little bit more solid. It has assumptions and you're guessing and all of that, but you have educated guesses into each one of these variables. That's a great baseline. Typically, if you do that, more than likely, your expected value is going to be higher in most cases when you partner. Okay, so you want to do this for yourself and you want to start thinking analytically if you're not doing so already. You want to start using spreadsheets to make some of these decisions, making data-based decisions. And this is one way, this is a typical advantage, is that you will have an expected value that is higher. Okay. What it many times also means is the amount of money that your organization can potentially receive many times is lower. So in this same example, if I'm applying individually for a $50,000 grant, the max that I could receive is $50,000. If I'm applying jointly for a $75,000 grant, then my max is 37,500. My max is actually lower on that one, right? So these are things that you're looking at on a spreadsheet when you're making some of these decisions. Now, this is the money decision, right? Which is, of course, the main reason we're applying for grants is to get money to do our thing. Okay. But there are many other advantages of partnering on a grant. Okay. One of them is building a relationship. One of them is understanding if this is an organization you would like to continue to work with by understanding their back end and their admin and their detail of their operations that you would otherwise not be able to know by just sort of being around them at networking events and sort of generally knowing them and hearing about things, right? That's all hearsay and that's very superficial. You get to know other organizations by working with them. So that's an advantage. You get that education. You are also practicing. Okay. You're practicing how to organize an application with another organization. You're practicing how to implement a program jointly with another organization, right? Which things there are like physically, you're not going to likely be in the same office as them every day. So you're going to be utilizing email, you're going to be utilizing text, Zoom calls, shared documents, collaborative sort of management, shared folders. And you've got to figure out how to do that because to this point, you might have just had your own little folder system, right? Now you've got to sort of integrate in some way, or at least make it clear how you're going to store all the plans, all the surveys, everything that goes along with running a program. You're going to get to learn how to do that. Um, so that's an advantage. Another advantage is that, again, this is a trend. So you are going to be seen by that funding organization and more specifically, the reviewers, because I'll say this again, organizations don't review applications. People review applications. Okay. So you're going to be putting this joint application or this partnership in front of people. Okay. That's important because many times, many of these same people will be sitting on multiple grant committees, sort of selection committees. Okay. Funders individually as people and as organizations are now trending towards this as well, they look favorably upon collaboration because it shows broader support and typically the potential for greater impact. So even if in the rubric for the grant application that you're looking at, even if it doesn't include anything about collaboration or partnership, there is a background noise that's happening, okay, that will happen in a conversation, that will happen in conversations that are happening at that organization and outside of it, that says, we could give $10,000 to this organization, or we can give $10,000 to these two organizations that submitted their grant collaboratively. Their scores are the same. But you know what? We're going to be able to develop relationships as a funder with these two, right? So now you're thinking as a funder, what is the funder intending to do? The funder intends to fund great projects, absolutely, but they're not doing so with, a 1-year approach. Most organizations are looking multiple year. They're funding many of the organizations, time and time again. They also want to build relationships. So if you're giving them this opportunity to build a relationship with two organizations for the price of one, that's this added benefit that may not be shown in that particular rubric. Now, the other thing that if you've written grants that I'm alluding to is that there are individuals who sit on committees at one organization, they see a grant application, and then they move over and they sit on another committee and they see potentially a very similar application that you're applying there. And that's a good thing, or that should be seen as an opportunity to make it a good thing. And partnerships, again, offer that opportunity. So as to say, let's say you're punching above your belt. You are looking to apply for a grant of $150,000 with another organization. You're both smaller, you've not necessarily received that much money, but you think you've got a better chance if you do it together. That's awesome. That's a great chance to come together. You might still not score well enough for any number of reasons. But you know what? People are going to remember they got together and they did this. They put this together as a joint application. Okay. So people will remember that. One, as they sit on other committees, that bias will continue. But in some organizations, there's this other list of worthy projects or funders that have told that funding organization, listen, if there's an application that comes through and it doesn't get fully funded or it doesn't get funded at all, I want to see it because we understand that there's multiple sort of agendas at work when you're looking at pooling resources from multiple entities or individuals and then trying to distribute from that pool. It's somewhat a little bit complicated and things get missed. I'm a philanthropist and I'm somewhat entrepreneurial. Just send those projects to me. That happens a lot, especially in regional and smaller sort of pooled United Way, community foundation, even sort of coalition funding opportunities where your application may not be funded by that grant opportunity, but it gets kicked down the road. Doesn't happen as much with corporate entities. There's a CSR thing at play there, and they're not passing it along typically. But with the more community based funding opportunities, your organization might be put in front of a half dozen other individual entities that want to fund something like what you're putting together. And if you have a partnership, it's just generally going to be looked upon more favorably. So those are some of the advantages. Now, what are the challenges of partnerships? Okay, there's a lot of challenges. So some of the challenges have to do with just literally agreeing on what you're going to do. That's most important. What is the framework of the project that we want to do together? Forget about the grant for a second. What do we want to do together that's going to enhance both of our missions, that's going to make our work individually both stronger? Where are there efficiencies? Where are there opportunities to learn from each other? Right? What are those things operationally that matter? You have to identify those first. You can't just look at the opportunity and say, oh, this is a great opportunity to work together. You do what you do, we do what we do. We'll just put it in together and we'll figure out the rest. Okay. That I've seen, and that causes a lot of headaches. Okay. And a lot of tension, and sometimes can actually weaken a relationship between two organizations instead of strengthen it. So that's number one, the challenge of just sitting down and understanding what another organization does and how they do it. Like getting into when somebody calls your organization to request services, what do you do? Who answers the phone? What is your protocols? Right? What's your standard operating procedure? And vice versa. You're sharing with them what you do. They can probably help you and you could probably help them. Most organizations don't usually have consultants, so they're making stuff up or they're doing whatever, best practice thing that they've read about, but there's usually opportunities to look at, that process. So that's the first challenge, is just syncing up and understanding each other. The second challenge then would be deciding upon what you're going to do together. The third is then putting together and submitting the actual grant application. So in doing that, there's a step before that, which is like, who's going to do what with this grant? In some cases, you might say, I want to write this grant. I want to be the lead on this grant, and I want you, organization, to give me, now that we've agreed upon this, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Those are the things that I need from you by this date or these dates in order that I may get you the draft that you can review and we can work together to edit so that we can ultimately submit on this date. Okay. So when you are looking at a collaborative grant opportunity, as I've said in other videos, you want to look at the open date, not just the close date. Okay, because it takes longer to do these grants. There are more potential hiccups that happen along the way in these grants than there are if you're doing it individually. Okay, so that's a challenge in terms of project planning, the grant writing, and also the timeline. Okay, so the timeline needs to be really looked ahead. So that's a challenge. The other challenge is the implementation of the program. Okay, not only who's going to do what and when, but things like how often will you communicate and how will you communicate? What are the ways in which you're going to collaborate on the documentation and how is that going to happen? Who is going to maintain the relationship with the funder along the way? And what do we do if things don't go as planned? And the things that not going as planned in many cases in nonprofits are, of course, costs being more than you thought that they would be. You need to plan for that. And if there is no reserve, then there probably should be some effort put into a reserve. But also really commonly is staff changes. Okay, this is such a high turnover space that you might be working with one individual at an organization and then they leave and there's somebody new that comes in that has to learn that job, and simultaneously while learning that job they have to learn about this new thing that you guys just made up together to fulfill this sort of joint partnership. That's something to think about as well. If you're working with an organization that doesn't have redundancies built in, where if one person goes away the whole thing kind of falls apart, that's a little scary. Okay, that's a little bit of a liability that you're taking on. Okay, so that's another challenge that you'll have. Another challenge will be the actual reporting. Okay, so who's responsible for what portions of the report, who compiles the information, and who submits it? Okay, that is a challenge for sure. Okay, so having that project plan of the grant writing process, but also the detailed project plan of the actual project is very important. Okay, these are the things to consider when deciding if a partnership is right for you. The high level note that I'll have is it's another skill that as a grant writer, you will need. If you are looking to write grants for the next 5 or more years, you need this skill, whether you know it or not right now. If you are in a niche, I'll say, there may be opportunities for you to not need this skill, like a very specific niche of grant writing, a type of federal, a specific department, an academic grant writing. You might not need this. You might be able to make a career out of it. You might be able to get your organization what it needs. But I'm going to say that's an exception. The direction that we're going is that the ability for individual community-based organizations to receive funding will be increasingly more of a function of their ability to work collaboratively with other groups. Okay, that is the direction we're going. So I hope this gives you a better understanding of whether partnering on a particular grant is the right move and how to navigate some of these challenges and some of the variables. If you want to double tap, go ahead and download the free guide that's in the description with more tips. And if you have any questions about partnering on grants, pop them into the comments and I would be happy to help there. So thank you so much for jumping into this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.